Hello, so I wanted to do a video on factorising quadratic expressions. I've got 4 examples to run through, but just to start with, on the left hand side you should already be comfortable with questions where you're given 2 brackets and you're asked to expand them, so x plus 4, x plus 9. Remember there's an invisible times here, and when we expand those we get x squared plus 13x plus 36. Today I'm going to show you how we go the other way. So rather than expanding brackets, we're factorising them, putting them back into brackets. So I have a couple of questions. So I've got 4 examples to run through, and we'll start with this one here. So when you are doing these questions, I want you to look at 2 things. I want you to look at the number on its own that doesn't have a letter attached to it, and also the number before the letter, not the squared bit, just in this case the R bit. We are basically now looking for a pair of numbers that multiply to give you positive 16. So we're looking for the factors of positive 16. So if we just list those factors, pairs of numbers that multiply to give you 16, you could have 1 and 16, you could have 2 and 8, or you could have 4 and 4. So it's the 2 things in our brackets are the 2 numbers in our brackets are going to be one of these pairs of numbers. The way we choose which pair to use is that we look at this number here, and I want you to include the sign that goes before it as well. We want them to sum, means add up to positive 10. So if I'm just going to work out the sum of each of these pairs of factors, which is what we get when we add them up. So 1 plus 16 gives you 17, 2 plus 8 gives you 10, and 4 plus 4 gives you 8. These are all positive numbers. So the pair of factors that we're going to use to make this plus 10 bit over here are 2 and 8. So I'm going to put my 2 pairs of brackets in. The only way you could get r squared when you expanded these brackets was to have r at the start of each bracket. Now because this 2 and 8, that was a positive 2 and that was a positive 8, I'm right, plus 2 in there and plus 8 in there. You could always double check it by expanding those brackets, r plus 2, r plus 8, to see if you get r squared plus 10r plus 16. So that's example 1, that's our answer. Example 2, again I'm going to highlight the 2 numbers. So I want a pair of numbers that give me a product, we call it, is what we get when we multiply them together, of negative 16, and they have to have a sum of negative 6. So I'm always going to start by writing out, in this case, the factors of negative 16. It's so important to include that negative number. Now I'm going to worry about the negative in a second. I'm just going to start by thinking through what are the factors of 16. So 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Now if I multiplied each of these pairs of factors together, 1 times 16 gives me 16, 2 times 8 gives me 16, 4 times 4 gives me 16. I want a pair of factors, a pair of numbers that multiply to give me negative. So that tells me that one of those 2 numbers, not both, one of those 2 numbers needs to be negative. So I could have negative 1 and 16, negative 2 and 8, negative 4 and 4. However, the negative could also go in front of the other number. So I'm just going to write out these numbers again, the pairs of numbers again. And the negative could also be in front of these ones here. So those are all my pairs of numbers that would multiply together to give me a product of negative 16. I now want to find the pair that have a sum of negative 6. So for each of these pairs of numbers, I'm just going to work my way through and we're going to add them up. Negative 1 plus 16 gives me positive 15. Negative 2 plus 8 gives me positive 6. Negative 4 plus 4 gives me 0. Now 1 add negative, remember when you've got two signs next to each other and they're different, that becomes a takeaway. So 1 take away 16 is going to be negative 15. 2 take away 8 is going to be negative 6. And 4 take away 4 is going to give me 0. So the pair of numbers that I'm going to use to make negative 6, to give me a sum of negative 6, are going to be this positive 2 and this negative 8. So when I do my two brackets again, this time to get h squared it has to be h and h, because when I expanded that, h times h gives me h squared. And my two brackets, this 2 is a positive 2, so it means that has to be plus 2. And this is a negative 8, so I'm going to write minus 8, negative 8 in there. It is also worth noting that h plus 2, h minus 8, you could write it the other way round. That's absolutely fine, that's equally as acceptable. Okay, two more examples. So the signs are really important here. I didn't mean to do that. Let's rub that out. The signs are really important here. So again, I'm going to start with this number on its own, and I just want to find the factors of positive 24. So I could have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, or 4 and 6. Those are all my pairs of factors. However, if I work out the sum of each of these numbers, 1 and 24 gives me 25, 2 and 12 gives me 14, 3 and 8 gives me 11, and 4 and 6 gives me 10. You will notice over here that I want my numbers to add up to negative 14, to give me a sum of negative 14. Now, none of these numbers, none of these pairs of factors give me a sum of negative 14. So another way, and you need to watch out for these, of getting to having two numbers that multiply together to give me positive 24 is if both of those numbers were negative. Now if I work out the sum of each of these, when I add these numbers together, that's going to give me negative 25, that's going to give me negative 14, that's going to give me negative 11, and that's going to give me negative 10. So the one I want to use to get negative 14 are these two numbers here. So when I do my brackets, in this case it's going to be E and E at the start of the brackets, and it's just going to be negative 2 and negative 12. Because the negative 2 and negative 12 add to give me negative 14, and they multiply together to give me plus 24. So we factorised those that quadratic expression. Okay, last question. You need to. I'm going to do a separate video on these because even these questions can be easier, or slightly more tricky. So I will do. I've got a second video ready to go on this as well. But I just want to kind of introduce you to this sort of question. You need to be very careful with these quadratic expressions. Everything we've done so far has not had a number in front of the squared term. So if I look back at the question 1, it was just r squared, which is 1r squared. We don't write the 1. This one was h squared. This one was e squared. So watch out if there is what we call a coefficient, a number before the squared term. If that is the case, there is an extra step to do. What we are going to do is, instead of finding the factors of 20, you need to multiply these two terms together. So I'm doing 2 times, that's a positive 20. Sometimes that's going to be a negative, but I'll do an example of that in the next video. So that gives me positive 40. So we are now, instead of finding the factors of 20, we're going to find the factors of positive 40. So just writing those out again, 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8. Those are all my pairs of factors of 40. So What we are now going to do is we're going to have a look at this positive 13k in the middle, but I'm only interested in the positive 13k, sorry, the positive 13 bit for a second. So I now want to find the pair of the factors that sum to positive 13. So I'm just going to work my way through adding these up. So the ones I want to use are going to be this 5 and this 8, both of which are, I should have written these in, are positive numbers. So I am now going to rewrite the original question, this whole question, but instead of writing 13k, I'm going to break it down. So 2k squared, instead of 13k, I'm going to pretend I've got 5k's and then another 8k's. That 5 and the 8 are just from here. And then the plus 20 goes on the end. We're putting the plus 20 in, not the plus 40 that we've found the factors of. Okay, I am now going to, after the first two terms, I want to put an imaginary line. I'm going to factorise the left-hand side just on its own. So let's do this bit in green. Oh, let's do this bit in green. So looking at 2k squared and 5k, the highest common factor of both of those terms is k. So I'm going to put that outside my bracket. I've got k, I want 2k squared. So I would need to multiply k by 2k to get 2k squared. I would then need to multiply k by positive 5 to get plus 5k. Then I'm going to look at the right hand side because we factored that left hand side now, factorise that left hand side. So I'm just looking at this bit. The highest common factor of positive 8k and positive 20 is a positive 4. So that goes outside the bracket. If I've got 4, I would need to multiply it by 2k to get 8k. And then finally, if I've got 4 and I want to get positive 20, I'm multiplying this by positive 5. Now, it is a good indicator that you've got it right if this and this are the same. They should always be the same if you've got it correct. So now our two brackets become this k and this positive 4. K plus 4. Let me do that k again. And the second bracket is going to be this 2k plus 5, but we only need to write it once. 2k plus 5. Again, you could have 2k plus 5 and k plus 4. It is worth mentioning that when we broke this bit down here, it doesn't actually matter if you write plus 8k plus 5k or plus 5k plus 8k. Because when you factorise it, if you factorise it correctly, you should still get the same two brackets. Either of these is acceptable as your answer. Okay, so I'm going to just show you quickly a question generator that I will upload a link to, so you can download a copy of it. As always, you can have increasing difficult questions. Generate new questions. That's just an example. I've just gone through 4 examples and they're in that order. So question 1 was the first example, question 4 was the hardest, and they get progressively more difficult. You can get the answers one at a time or all at once. If you want to try a particular type of question, let's say type 3, select type 3 and you can generate those sorts of questions. When you get really confident, what you can do is you can generate a mix of questions, so I don't tell you what kind of difficulty level they are, and you can just work your way through and practice those and get the answers as well. That's it. I hope that was useful. Like I say, I will do another video shortly on looking at the fourth type of example of question, but those can get increasingly more difficult as well. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.